Good evening, everybody. Welcome. Tonight we have a very special guest, fantastic professional, Dr. Gabija Toleikyte, a neuroscientist. Gabija, good evening and welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on board.
Hello, Jim. Hello, everybody who is watching the show. Nice to be here.
Fantastic. Okay, you're a neuroscientist. Tell us a bit about what you do. Tell us a bit about how you combine neuroscience, which at the moment is with coaching. Tell us a bit about what you do and how you do what you do.
Okay. Well, I'll be quite brief. There is a long story behind, but I'll be brief. So I've been studying in 3 different universities over the last 11 years. And a year ago, I finished my PhD at University College London. And I did research in my PhD on navigation and basically brain GPS. And over the years, like when I'm working in the labs doing the neuroscience experiments, I realized, well, I came to neuroscience to understand humans and to understand why we do what we do and how we function best. However, I realized that in the labs, even though experiments are really fascinating and exciting, it's really far-fetched from day-to-day life. And then on the side, I got a coach qualification and I became internal coach at the University College London. I started coaching university staff, professors, department heads, lecturers, scientists, administrative staff. And when I started coaching, I realized that how powerful this technique was, helping to people really find their own answers, and no matter what the situations were. And then my heart was fully in it. I didn't expect it, but I really fell for coaching. And then very soon after, when I was finishing, when I was actually halfway through my PhD, I started my own coaching company. I started coaching people who were in the jobs they hated. And also I now coach a lot of people who want to start their own businesses. They have great ideas, but they have a lot of blockages within them to pursue that further. And some of my business clients, they started asking me, they say, like, Gabija, I know you're a neuroscientist. Also, I've forgotten to mention, I teach teenagers in schools. I teach a course I designed for teenagers to understand themselves better, really. And right now, actually, I teach in 4 different schools in completely different parts of London. And some of these company directors were asking, could you do a seminar in our company? Since the coaching sessions, sometimes we're sharing, what happens in the brain when we are trying to change, or why are they finding the transitions difficult, or what happens in the brain of the team members when they're using one leadership style as opposed to another. So long story short, I after my PhD, I went full on in coaching world, and then I realized that actually my expertise for neuroscience complements coaching very well. And I started doing a lot of workshops and seminars where I share the neuroscience insights and coaching tools in addition to that. And that's something what I do in personal one-to-one coaching as well. I share some neuroscience insights, and using coaching tools, I help the clients to implement the change that they seek.
Fantastic. And the thing is, Gabija, what's your opinion on this? There's so much literature out there. There's many motivational speakers. There's so many seminars out there. People with all the information out there. It's all there for people. Why do people tend to struggle to change? Or if they do change, why isn't it long lasting? Because you look at the stats. For example, say January, many people join a gym, they write resolutions, they seminar or a coach, they make a few changes. It doesn't take long after they made a few changes to back to where they were before, and they kind of take 5 steps forward and 6 back, so to speak. And what's your opinion on why people struggle to change?
That's one of my favorite topics, to be honest. There is quite a few reasons, but first of all, especially in the personal development world, there is a lot of motivational speakers and people who help you to pump yourself up. Or we do that also with our mere willpower, trying to willpower a transition quickly, fast, and you know, and that initial excitement can get us a little bit, can create some change for a short period of time. It feels rewarding, it feels quite good. However, on the long run, usually we come back where we started. And there is a few explanations from neuroscience point of view on that. So actually, I have brain by my hand, so I can, if I could explain you briefly about this. This is the brain, by the way. This is the model of the brain. This is a real size of the brain, so it's kind of would fit on my skull if I wanted to put it in. And you know, like the brain has many different parts, and that's where our everything, you know, our personality lies in there. Our feelings are somewhere deep in there. Actually, I can split it up in parts. So our feelings are just that. Actually, I can't show it very well. In another part, our movements are there, our balance and posture are there. So there is, everything is in the brain, really. Different areas are responsible for different things. Well, if we look in the brain at the evolutionary point of view, there is a so-called true model, the model of the brain in terms of how brain developed. Well, the model has some criticisms, and there is some it can't explain everything. However, it can explain quite well in terms of why we come back to where we started. So if we look at this wrinkly bit out there, do you see, Jim? It's quite a wrinkly bit. It's called neocortex, or human brain. It's the most developed part of the brain, which allows us to think, to speak. That's where our personality is. That's where our, you know, all the aspirations and dreams, and where desire to change is. Where and where our capability to learn and implement new strategies is as well. Now, if we go to the other part, I don't have a pen on me actually. If the other part just there in the middle, if you can see, it's called a mammal brain or limbic system. And that's a part which is responsible for habits, for doing these things in exactly the same way you've been doing before. And that's where, you know, our behaviors such as brushing teeth every morning in this, at the same time. You know, some people brush before breakfast, some people after breakfast. Or what we do if we miss our bus, you know, what's the coping strategies we do all the time if we miss the bus, or how we talk to people, how we what things do we think about on the train. So basically, we have habits on both emotions, thoughts, and actions. We are very habitual organisms. And also that's where our emotions lie in that area, in the mammal brain.
Yes.
And if we go... Sorry?
Yeah, no, I find it really, and I think that I always felt, Gabija, that because what tends to happen with people when they go to motivational speaking, they release chemicals in the brain. They go on that high, that dopamine's released, and with that, they build an association with that event, and they go to the next one, and
yeah. So that's addiction.
Always been okay.
Right. So in the brain, if I split, this is like a brain Lego. I can split it in parts. So this is so area called basal ganglia, and there is reward centers in there, which when we do something what feels good immediately, give as immediate reward as eating a piece of chocolate, or being, you know, emotionally pumped up in the seminar, or playing computer games, or having a drink with mates in the pub, that releases dopamine. And dopamine is a very important chemical in the brain. It's a very important chemical. It keeps us motivated. It's important for our general well-being. However, anything that feels good in the short term has a potential to become an addiction. And there is not a secret. There is a lot of personal development junkies out there. People who keep reading, going to seminars, talking about it, but actually not implementing that in real life, you know?
Of course, yeah. No, very much so. I agree. And in a way, it's almost like idealistic for people to go to a seminar. And you can do. I've always thought you can make a big change in a small amount of time, but I've always felt also that we've got to have my philosophy has been always about incremental change, where people talk about comfort zones, and sink or swim. And I think that sink or swim for me is idealism, because I always feel that in a comfort zone, we should just extend it bit by bit incrementally, and rather than try and just jump out and put pressure on ourselves, it's okay, can we edge closer to where we want to be in our own time, in our own pace, it make it more of a lifestyle change. And I think motivational seminars, and there's some good speakers out there, I've read many books and been to a few myself, but I think in the end, seeing it what it is and also getting some tools and techniques. I think also psych is important too, an understanding of how the brain basically works as well will help people go a long way towards moving forward, you know? Yeah.
Let me get back to that. This is a very, very important point. I'll just mention one more evolutionary area of the brain, and then I'll get back to why actually I also believe personally that doing incremental gradual change is much more beneficial for us and much more feasible, and why our brain actually resists a sudden change. So after mammal brain, the older area of the brain is called a reptilian brain or lizard brain. That's just described down there.
Yes.
And that area is responsible for survival, for feeding, for movement. This area is also reptilian brain. Wait, sorry, you can't see. This area is responsible for movement and for heartbeat, for digesting food, basically for surviving. So if you imagine animals, you know, like lizards don't have emotions. Lizards can't learn new things. They kind of just live to survive. And if they are hungry, they could easily eat their own children. No problem for them.
Of course, yeah.
As mammals have emotions, and they are very habitual also beings. Like, you know, if you have do you have a dog, Jim? Do you? I can't see. There is some delay between us, but anyway, let's imagine if you had a dog, right? What happens if you start unlocking the door? What your dog would do? Dog just runs next to the door and is so happy to see you. So first of all, it learned the habit that if the key is in the lock, it means that Jim is coming home. Jim is going to be home. And because it has emotional attachment to Jim, it feels happy as well. It gets emotions. Well, and the main problem in implementing a change is that where we maintain our habits, and actually we are habitual beings, because neocortex, or the area of the brain which required for learning and changing habits, eats up a lot of energy. It's like very, very expensive part of our brain. It's like a plane, you know, like in terms of petrol consumption. As the mammal part is like a car, like a Volkswagen Golf or a Toyota Yaris. It requires petrol to go, but not as much. We can go on the same amount of petrol. We can go for, you know, a days, as opposed to neocortex would take like just, you know, it would last only a few minutes to eat it up, all that energy. And lizard brain is the most efficient because it has to be active at all the times. So lizard brain is like a Vespa or like a push bike, you know, it doesn't take much energy to it. So what happens, you know, when we, like in our day-to-day life, especially in the cities like London and other busy places, we all have multiple responsibilities. And therefore we are a bit overstretched, and we have limited source of energy available to our brain. So when we are stressed and when we're exhausted at the end of the day, we turn back to our mammal brain and lizard brain. Our human brain is out of the game. It's not entirely correct. It's still working, but we are incapable to make good decisions and to implement a change which we know is good for us. So if you want to you know, change your nutrition and you come back home tired and you've been eating pizzas before, when you're stressed and tired, you're more likely to eat pizza again. Unless you made the decision in the morning, the best is to do it like as the first thing in the morning, either to do activity towards the change. If you want to exercise, you know, go for a run or do exercise in the morning. Start the day with actually already doing activities towards that change. You know, if you want to change your nutrition, make yourself juice. Have a healthy option of breakfast. Yeah, and that would actually set the tone for the day a little bit differently, not to leave it to the evening. And another important part of that is do activities which reduce stress in your life. Because under stress, we are like 5-year-old children in terms of our brain activity. We can't really be very creative, and we can't think, actually children are creative, that's not a fair comparison, but we can't really take very, very good decisions under stress. So very important is actually to reduce, before you want to implement any change whatsoever, take a good care of your lifestyle, reduce stress, and do the things which in terms of a change, either as first thing in the morning or make a decision in the morning. Sorry, I went on about it for a while.
No, it's really interesting stuff, and to hear your point of view as well. And for me, speaking personally, I juice in the morning. I always have a juice in the morning. I have lots of vegetables, a lot of green vegetables, broccoli, cucumber, and I put some fruit in there as well, just for the taste. And in the morning, I have a morning ritual. I do my gratitude list as well. I write down what I'm grateful for in the morning, and as well, just to get the brain going. Those chemicals, endorphins, the dopamine in the brain, and the spirit of the day starts positive, you know. And then at a certain point during the day, I'll log on, and if I have to check emails, I will do. I'll leave it while I'm at logically where I'm revved up and good to go, and I have ritual meditation and going for walks, and just to keep, like I said before, the chemicals in the brain flowing and stay in that positive mindset. Like you mentioned, stress and pressure,
yeah,
it can people to type and convert people to situations where they have no. I think the interesting thing is for me is that the brain, it's almost like being, it's almost like a blessing or a curse, because we've got the ability, practically no other mammal can do, and we hypothesize on things that have never happened, and we do a lot of that. And I always use this analogy, Gabby. I say to people, let's say it's Christmas time and you go shopping. You go to 10 stores, 9 stores are wonderful, and they're really nice. They make you a cup of tea, and they're kind to you, and they can't do enough for you. They're really helpful. Then you go to one store and they're rude and abrupt, and they shortchange you. The shop I'll remember and tell their partner about is always the 1 out of 10 that was a negative one. And the brain being how it is, and in evolutionary terms, we've got these, like you mentioned there, parts of the brain that, evolutionary point of view, yeah, we've got fight, flight, freeze, but we've also got this neocortex that has got the ability. Sometimes it's quieting that brain down at certain points, because sometimes we tend to ruminate. Certainly, I know we're all human. I do it sometimes myself. I find myself doing that. If I find myself taking a step back, meditating, and just being aware of my thoughts. And when I work with clients, I get them to do a lot of what we call cognitive restructuring, and to see things a little bit differently and be more aware of what their thoughts are and the emotion and behavior, which helps us start moving forward in a better direction. I think depending on certain situations, and with certain clients like trauma, and the deeper the trauma, the more we've got different levels of resilience. Different things affect different people different ways, but the more impact the trauma has, the more and the longer forward. And that's the thing, really, I think, for the most head around how to find processes that we use in different areas, and, you know, exercise and psychological strategies, and I use the analogy that you don't eat one good meal and you're healthy forever. You don't do one train ever. And same as psychological skills, mental skills, you've got to keep exercising the mind, otherwise you degenerate. What's your thoughts on that anyway?
Yeah, exactly. You know, that's very interesting what you're mentioning. So let me mention one thing on that from neuroscience point of view. So now we know, it's only quite recent, it's only last 20 years, we know that our brain is plastic, which
of course, yeah,
can change. It's a simple phenomenon called brain plasticity that, you know, in one area of our brain, we even get new neurons throughout the life. And that's increased if we both exercise, and also if we are exposed to different stimuli. So if we do many different things, we get more new neurons in our brain throughout life. And that's why it's so important throughout the life to keep learning, to keep doing your things, and to keep exercising. And it's important that exercise has to be the one which gives you pleasure. So they did experiments in the labs on rats, where they put the I don't remember whether it was mice or rats on rodents, and they put the running wheel in the place where the rodents were. And the rodents, they love running on this wheel. They are really active. They are really, I think it was mice actually, because mice are like really vigilant and they love to run. And they were just running, spontaneously on their wheel. And then another group of rodents, they had no running wheel in the environment. And the third group was exposed to exercise they didn't want to do, but they were kind of persuading them or gently forcing them to do the exercise. They were pushing them, they would go somewhere else. They would put them back and like kind of be experimentals were persistent with them doing exercise, as sometimes we do in the gyms, right? And of course, yeah. And what they found, that only the group which did exercise, which they enjoyed, had increased brain plasticity, and that's due to this chemical called BDNF, or brain-derived neurotrophic factor, and that is important for so neurotrophic factors allow neurons to survive and make the networks stronger, and since in the mice which were doing exercise they enjoyed, the plasticity was improved and the networks were surviving, the ones which were, they could learn faster, basically, which is fascinating by itself. So first of all, doing the exercise which you enjoy, very important, and doing different activities. Well, now on the point of stress, actually, let's come back to neuroplasticity. So, however, even though our brain is plastic, but each network, the networks we use most often, they become stronger and stronger and stronger. So let's imagine now when I'm talking to you, Jim, I have a network of speech active in my head, and which involves a few different areas. I'm looking at you, and I have a network of looking at the computer activated. I'm maybe thinking what to say, and I have certain networks activated. When I cycle in the streets of London, I have cycling networks activated, and so on and so forth. So in the same time, our thinking patterns, such as whether we notice negative things on the street or positive things on the street, they also are habits. Our perception is habits. We don't all see the world as it is exactly the same. We all see different, even if we walk the same street, we notice different things. And that's because we have different networks strengthened in our brain. And the same, if you ever, like, for example, if I ever given a talk and I've been strongly criticized towards it, then I would be oversensitive to criticism. And I might, even if there was 5,000 people saying that it was amazing talk, I would be, I would focus on one negative one. And that can be changed. And the way to change it is actually, like I do that also. Gratitude list in the morning is one perfect exercise to write down what things you're grateful for in your life. But also in the evening, writing what things went well today. Instead of thinking over and over again what things didn't go as well as you would like to, just write down, actually today, or for example, today what happened to me, I missed the train. But initially I was gutted. Oh no, I missed the train and I'll be late to the school. I'm delivering a tutorial for 14, 15-year-old girls. And then I realized, you know what? I missed lunch, actually. So I bought sandwich as I was waiting for another train. And as I got to the school, I realized that the class, the girls were running over with the assembly. So the class actually started exactly the same amount later as I was late. So at the end, it turned out so perfect. So that could, I could add to my list, something like that. Or some other things which went well. So once we start noticing what things went well, our networks in the brain which notice good things would become stronger.
Yes, that's really interesting. You mentioned this before, sort of touched on very briefly on nutrition and what we eat. I found that it's quite fascinating, really, how what we eat has a big impact on us as well. I'll give you a quick example, Gabby. A while ago, I was doing some work with this woman, and she had severe anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And she'd been to see many skilled therapists before. So she'd seen, then she came along to see me and said, well, I've been to therapists before. I've got this anxiety, general anxiety disorder, and it tends to flare up for different parts of the day. And I sat down and been to see some very experienced therapists, and no doubt their strategies, techniques, they've done their case formulation, decided what interventions to do. And I thought, well, look at what she'd already done, and she brought in some files through, and I thought, well, what else can I add to this? Other than pretty much everything that I can think of has been done. So to cut a long story short, I thought, you know what? I said, what's your consumption, food consumption like? What? And I had one of the moments I thought, okay, if I give you this food, can you do it in between sessions?
Yeah.
And I said, come back and we'll see what happens. And she brought back the food diary. It was 11, 12 cups of coffee a day. Well, it's very likely that's contributing towards anxiety as well. But she was adamant it wasn't. So I did a behavioral experiment. So, okay, I'm blood pressure monitor in, and when you drink 2 cups of coffee, it goes up and your heart rate goes up to prove to her that it's contributing towards the anxiety. I'm not saying it was only the only reason anxiety. There were other factors that we explored and dealt with, but it sort of touches on your point as well, where exercise is really important too, because, well, I think it's really important. The first thing I tend to do with various issues is look at their sleep hygiene, make sure they're sleeping well, and make sure that they're also eating well, to the point that we all, certainly me, I do sometimes, I have patterns of habitual eating, but as a general rule, for people to look at their food, the food that has index that sometimes people eat high index, high sugary foods, that go up and they go back down again. So without sort of going into too much detail of the time, what's your take on the nutrition side, Gabby? What are your thoughts on that in terms of how important is it for people to well?
Yeah.
Or at least look at their nutrition.
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. Nutrition as well as the just general well-being habits are crucial for being in the best state cognitively as well. So to produce brain chemicals called neurotransmitters, which are basically the chemicals which make us feel in certain way. So dopamine makes us feel good and happy and rewarded. Serotonin makes us feel just generally in a good mood, you know, and when we lack serotonin, we get depressed. And there is other neurotransmitters which are important, and to create them, we need certain elements from our nutrients. But what happens if a lot of times when people eat too much junk food, even though they get abundant amount of calories, they are starving on nutrients. Another example is B group vitamins. If somebody is really deficient in B group vitamins, they can develop severe anxiety. I'm not sure about, but I could imagine. But they could have severe learning problems. The memory could be affected. The general well-being. They could be depressed. They could even have suicidal thoughts. And an example of that is for example, if people have food intolerances, like as milk or gluten, if they are really, really intolerant to them, and their guts, for example, right? If they keep eating the food which the body doesn't take very well, and the guts get inflamed. So the guts are there to absorb the nutrients from our food. It doesn't happen in the stomach; it happens in the guts. And if your guts are inflamed, they don't absorb nutrients, and especially then one of the symptoms is deficiency in B group vitamins. And I know somebody personally who was depressed. He was suicidal during teenage years. He was in really, really bad place. He had learning difficulties. He was a mess. And only some years later they realized that it was majority affected by his food intolerance. He was really, really malnourished because his body wasn't absorbing B group vitamins. So probably the best call is really to have very varied diet and get from the real protein, you know, like from vegetables, from fruits, from real meat if you eat meat, you know, rather than meatballs or like burgers. No, you know, like from a piece of chicken breast or like chicken shish kebab. there is the alternatives which are as delicious, if not even more delicious, as the junk food elements. And just quickly comment on sleep. Sleep is crucial. Lack of sleep is probably number one effect on anxiety. And I know that myself. When I was writing my PhD thesis, I didn't sleep very much. Actually, I couldn't sleep. I was like in the state that I had so little time. I just had really trouble sleeping. And I wasn't fun to be around. I tell you that. You can ask my friends. I just wasn't fun to be around. I was super sensitive. I was really sensitive to every single thing. I would get emotional straight away. I just wasn't in a good place, and I wasn't in a good mood. So sleeping, the amount of time which is needed to you is crucial. And right now I'm really actually, I prioritize sleeping. Like even before this interview, I was sharing with Jim, I taught in 2 different schools today. I delivered 4 tutorials. I was like cycling about. And when I came back, the first thing I did, I took a nap before this interview. Because I know that, you know, I can't try to get something else done. But what my body and my brain needs most now is a quiet time. Because when we sleep, our brain processes information. We learn, we actually, during sleep, many fascinating things happen. But one of them is our short-term memories get converted to long-term. So if you want to learn and keep changing and keep implementing new things, you need to sleep enough. As simple as that.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting stuff. And that's one of the first things I always look at with my clients is sleep hygiene.
Yeah.
I think we generally explore with most clients, depending obviously what issue they present with, but that's certainly an area. And depression, we look at how they're sleeping, and certainly for me, in my experience, I find that I like to meditate every day for half an hour or so, and I feel after I've meditated, my energy levels recharge the batteries, I'm good to go. And and I think the thing is, it's collectively where I think you do the gratitude list, you do some affirmations, you meditate, visualization, and bit by bit, it's almost like a lifestyle change that people make in terms of going forward. And certainly with my clients, I give them a lot of psychoeducation, understand the basics of how the mind works, and then give them some techniques to work on away from working with me. And generally speaking, it's almost like an analogy. It's like, say, a personal trainer will prescribe exercise. I'll prescribe those training they can do, and the key thing is for them sort of go away and carry on doing that to make sure that they keep going. And for me, it's really important too for them to have in terms of what they want to gain, how they want to function better, what their goal is, what their aim is. And when we sort of talk about goals, I'm not just saying goals in the sense that these big goals, a house in the south of France. It's just general goals. Better. And the more we can grade that, what I generally tend to do myself is grade their emotions from, say, 0 to 100, 100 being high. And the thing is with psychology and the mind, it's not like physiology, where physiology measure it, heart rate, you reduce your heart rate from 6 per minute, you run a race 10 seconds, can you get 9.9? So I look the mind and ways to quantify moderation of belief. So if someone's got belief that isn't serving them in terms of gaining an outcome or a series of thoughts, then ways to sort of moderate that and the improvements, and experiments, activation, and we do exposure. So looking at ways that we can measure improvements and get them to where I want to get to, which is key. Insight in terms of it's a massive area. We've got a short time to sort of touch on a huge area, but give a bit of insight in terms of how certainly my approach is in terms of moving people forward, and certainly complements a lot of the work. I think what we do complements each other really, in the sense that for me it's more of a graded approach. You know, you are here, that's where you want to be. Let's find a way to move towards there. Can we sort of stay there and move beyond there and go forward? But what I was going to ask you as well, which is quite interesting for me, having been in the field of therapy for a long time, I always get asked the question, Gabija, is it nature or nurture? And I've always maintained, we'd have to be naive to think that, you know, there are some people who say it's nature. I'm sure, you know, nurture. I think it's a combination of all these things. I think that how much nurture and nature is anybody's guess, but I think that sometimes certain people are more predisposed to certain emotions. So some people, for whatever reason, we've got certain color hair, we've got certain color eyes, traits. I'm sure the brain, we're predisposed to certain emotions, but obviously the other few years of life, which are crucial too in terms of our nurture too. But what's your thoughts? Where do you stand on that?
I get that question quite a lot, and especially when I teach in schools, my students often ask me that question as well. So just general rule of thumb, if anybody asks you that question, the best answer is always both. Because it is always both.
Yeah, exactly.
It is always both.
Yeah.
And now we actually, and you know, we can get discussing a bit about that. So for example, if you take brain chemistry, of course, some of us are generally a little bit more predisposed towards the happy state of being. Like I wake up in the mornings usually happy. And I know like I used to have a Portuguese flatmate who was quite the opposite. She would wake up grumpy, and then she would become happy as the day gone by. Yeah. And she couldn't believe that, you know, like even I would come back after have had a bike accident. My you know, default would be saying, Filippo, you wouldn't believe what happened. I had a bike accident, but it's so lucky that it happened next to the house of my friend. So she could take care of me. And she's like, I can't believe you had a bike accident. And even in that, you see a positive, right? So
yes,
there's a component which is genetic. My mom is a very, very positive person. However, since we were very little, we were exposed to her positivity. And children copy behavior. We are like little, you know, monkeys as we are kids. So of course it's hard to rule that out. Well, I have a sister though, who is as a kid, she always been very sensitive and very irritable. So she was, even though we both had the same mom, we were treated exactly the same way. And we share a lot of genes, let's be honest. But she has some differences in terms of her personality. And it's always both. It's always nature and nurture. And now we're finding, in terms of nurture, we're finding more and more ways how nurture affects us. So now we know there is a large boosting area called epigenetics.
Yes.
We know how our environment can also shape which of our genes are being used. And in certain,
course, yeah.
And the same child, if it's growing in loving and caring environment, can develop a lot of capabilities. It can be very intelligent. It can be very creative, very self-confident, and so on. However, if environment is really oppressing, certain genes are being turned off, and actually the development is being stuttered, it's being stalled. And then, you know, in certain areas now we know that actually the frontal lobes, or this part of the brain, which is responsible for personality, for critical thinking, for any executive functions, really, decision making, it's smaller in children from families when there is domestic violence, when they grow under the fear, when they are not cared and loved for enough. So now we learn more and more how actually that affects the development. So it's always both, always, in all the cases.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. I think that the world we're living in, sometimes from a psychological point, the environment, the world we live in, is quite a high pressured environment. We're born into this world and we have expectations on us. we sort of begin school and we go on a journey, really. And I'm not saying it's wrong, rules, but I think from a psychological point of view, we've got this primal brain, and we live in, it's almost like chronic agitation to set the brain off, fight, flight, freeze. Nothing. If you grew up in an environment where you had, I mean, there's always the case for people who grew up in a good environment and they end up, you know, it was the case for people who grew up in a negative environment. But what I always say to people, that, okay, let's say at birth, you were taken at birth and you were put in an environment, a really hostile, the environment you were in was like hostile, environment, really hostile, really aggressive and violent, and would it impact the person? And no doubt it would, but how much it would, we don't know, but it would do. And I think that for me, one of the great things about neuroplasticity is that, because in years gone by, 60s, certainly in the 60s anyway, they used to say, well, the child was far from the man. That first 7 years in, we're impressionable, we're raw.
Yeah.
You'll pretty much change. But now we know, and we've progressed in the age, we're sort of going a long way. Technology's taken a long way forward, and now we know that you can change. You have to change, but it's possible to change. So, you know, what I'm getting is that it's great to know we can change, but that said and done, I think one of the key things for me with my clients is them to have more compassion for themselves, to accept that's where you are, because sometimes we can be in denial. We beat ourselves up, and it sets that shouldn't I? Should I eat this? And why do I do this? And why do I do? You know what? You are where you are, so to speak.
Yeah.
Once you get through that range of emotions and the denial and emotion, the acceptance, you can start moving forward. I think my approach to therapy is okay. It's important for people to sort of move forward and just accept the situation for what it is. You know, we've got to take some responsibility on your fault. There are many reasons why you are where you are, whether it's a weight issue, whether it's a behavioral issue, whether it's anxiety. There's many, many reasons, and we could sort of like dig and uncover and be there forever, really. We move towards acceptance, compassion. And I tend to find in my passion an environment early on in life, they tend to flourish on an emotional point of view, but all that stuff, people, there's a fine line, Gabby, between you get up in the experience emotions till you go to bed at night. And I always think that mental illness, mental wellness, there's almost like a fine line between how frequent and the magnitude of our thinking, if you want to call it that, there's always between the two. And the key for me is what you said before, is to, grab our thoughts, be more aware of our thoughts, because if we let our thoughts drift away, they're just going to, like weeds in a garden, really. Acceptance there, and get a perspective process and decide on what we want to change. For me, so in a roundabout way, sort of in a nutshell, in the small time that we have, I sort of want to touch on my perspective in terms of some of the key things to change, really, and what affects people to change. And that nature-nurture debate, it's a grey area. It's very, very challenging to say what is going to be more influential than the other. In a perfect environment, you've got great loving upbringing, people are wonderful, your nature, nurture, all that sort of stuff, really, but that's idealism. There's no environment we know that's going to be perfect. There's obviously a spectrum between, good and bad. But what's your take generally?
If I may just add something to it. So our environment means many things, and our thoughts and our internal environment actually is the thing which affects us most. External environment can have some influence. So for example, if you're in a job you don't like, you can leave the job. If you're in a relationship which is not good for you, you can leave the relationship and get in another relationship, or you can try to change their relationship. Or if somebody is being mean to you, you can walk away from this person. However, if you are mean to yourself, if you are punishing yourself, negative mind chatter, you have nowhere to go. It's there with you. And that's a very toxic environment, because it's like constantly having stressors in your life. And if you As I mentioned before, the blood vessels, actually I might not have mentioned, to be honest, I kept meaning, the blood vesicles there in the neocortex, in human brain, they get contracted when we're stressed. So then there isn't enough oxygen and glucose for our human brain, for our rational mind, for our personality. So we actually even act differently when we are in such a state. And that's a place,
Yes.
really, it's really hard to change from that point. So first of all, getting in a better place with that and developing habits which help you to create better relationship with yourself is a key in there. It's one
Yes.
of the really crucial bits, and I unfortunately I have to work with my clients a lot in that area too. A lot of people who stay in the jobs they're not happy in, or who stay in the just places who are not happy, they're not happy in, or who don't do things which are good for them, like eating good food for them or creating the ideas they've been thinking about. A lot of them actually have quite, spiky relationship with themselves. And there is, firstly, you have to address that before you actually can move forward. And as you mentioned before, it's a gradual process. You can't suddenly, do everything like kind of differently at once. And our brain resists a sudden change. The sudden change activates our emotional brain, the brain area called amygdala, which creates anxiety and makes us do the things in the old way, and maybe with the compensation. If somebody had been on a very, very strict diet straight away from eating completely different food, then often what happens after a day or two, they freak out and they start eating the same food as before and even more maybe. So just to reduce that anxiety. So doing a gradual change, step by step, and what you mentioned before was very beautiful as well, that actually tracking your progress, doing in small steps. If A is where I am right now, so let's imagine somebody wants to get fitter and get more vitality in their life, and that's B, that's a goal, like being fit and strong and having a lot of energy. And A, let's look what reality looks like. And let's identify what steps are there together. One could be like start, cutting down the cups of, like 1 cup of coffee this week. Cutting down the croissant, for breakfast, and having banana instead this week. Maybe next week, starting exercising, maybe getting out of the train 2 stops before and walking the distance. Maybe next week it could be like hitting the gym and starting going to the gym, or like playing a tennis with your friend once a week. And then, kind of adding new habits on top. So, since the habits take time to create, there is a long discussion how long it takes. It takes long. In order for things to be automatic and a habit, and kind of that you no longer question, and if you are tired, you can do it automatic, that takes at least 3 weeks to create. And with some habits, like quitting 1 cup of coffee, that could take shorter. That could take like 10 days or something. And also, just very briefly, because I realize we have very little time. A lot of times when we want to create a change, I notice with my clients, a lot of times they have both negative associations with the new behavior they want to create, and that's not going to help. So what you want to do, you want to create negative associations with the old ways and positive associations with new ways. So to create a gradient of movement, because negative emotions activate pain centers in our brain, and it secretes the hormones which makes us averse of that. And positive emotions secrete other hormones in our brain, and that makes us want to do those things. So if you associate, changing your job with being unemployed and being scared and being worried, you're not going to do that. As simple as that. If you associate being, changing your nutrition habits with starving and not being able to eat your favorite chocolate, of course you're not going to do that. So write down 50 reasons, and that's I took that from Dr. John DeMartini, actually, whose work I really like. He always has to write 50 reasons, or sometimes he asks to write like, a few hundred of reasons, as many as you could think of. Firstly, what are the benefits for you and people who are important to you in your life? And for you in terms of things which are important to you in your life, implementing this change. And write down 50 things which you are paying now for not changing. How would you pay for that in future? You know, let's take 5 years from now. If you haven't changed your job you hate, how would your life look like in 5 years? How would your family's life look like in 5 years? What an example would you show for your kids? How would your relationships look like? How likely you are to find a partner which is good for you when you're in the job which is not good for you? So that often creates a kind of a gradient when we get really, really clear in our head. Why is it I want to do this specifically?
You know, it's really before, and in years gone by, before time roaming the earth, and it served us really well to the point that fight, flight, freeze, and we'd see a dinosaur tribe, we'd fight, we'd run, we'd freeze, and the issue these days is that we don't have dinosaurs roaming the earth anymore, not at least in most town centres, but we've got this world that is chronically agitated to spark the amygdala, where there's a reaction where not paying a bill is not going to kill us. You know, someone cutting us up on a lane and things are okay, it's not going to kill us. But it happens from when we get up in the morning and then you watch the news, there's doom and gloom, and you hear the radio, and consistently the mind is on threat activation. It's like, okay, do I run? Do I fight? Do I freeze? And people don't realize the psychological effect that all these things are happening. The analogy I use is like a piece of paper. Of a big paper, but if you keep ripping it away, you end up in a mess. And I think most people don't end up in a situation where overnight, because I think we're resilient as human beings, we can cope with big things, but I think what happens is that the big things that happen to us, like life being like it is, it's challenging at certain times, people break up, and we can sort of handle that, but it's the other things that go with that too. And I find that's what process, you know, that's what's really important, to have the safe place you go to every day, meditation, exercise, because if you don't keep on top of it bit by bit, it's gonna, like a virus on a computer, you know, you've got to keep the virus software going all the time, otherwise it's sort of, the virus comes back and it's running it up. The thing is, for me, I find that with people, sometimes what happens when they make changes, Gabija, if they, for example, for me, one is, for example, someone's looking to lose weight, if for whatever reason they have food, they beat themselves up rather than accept that you've had that food, it didn't hurt, but don't focus on it. It's done now.
Yeah, move on.
Yeah, one of the things I find that in mainstream, it's changing a bit now, but like the weight reduction groups, they focus too much on the food itself rather than the emotion and the association to food and the emotional driver, the behavioral. And the key thing for me, really, they focus so much on the food, the calorie, and that's the focus of the person's attention rather than the behavior and the emotion driving behavior, the thoughts. And when I work with people in weight reduction, as a general rule, yeah, we address some of the nutritional things, but we focus more on keeps you in a good place mentally and look at different options, like you said before. We cover in a short time, but we certainly focus more on the mind and controlling our own thoughts and controlling our own process. Now, there is that challenge, obviously, because you've got what we're aware of, what's an automatic thought, what's subconscious, really. But one of the key things I do, and a lot of in my practice, is I cultivate an attitude of mindfulness and be present and be in the now as often as you can be. We tend to spend our life a lot tomorrow, next year, 10 years, what if, but we also try and put right wrongs in the past. And I think for me, something in my experience, that everything cultivate attitude of mindful, be more present, in the sense that it's almost like a paradox. People say, well, Jim, what about my goals and my future? Well, the best chance you've got of your future being great and beautiful is being in the now. But the only moment you've got is the now. So I think as humans, and we go through this education system where we don't do any training really awareness. I think that the more we've got people like yourself that go into schools, the better place we'll be. Because I worked in care homes for a long time and secure unit, and I found a lot of people that had a lot of poor coping strategies off the back of challenging upbringings. And for me, one of the key points, the your thoughts you are, the better awareness you've got of how the mind works, the more coping strategies you have, the better chance you've got of having a better life. Because life is obviously wonderful, but it's also very challenging too, so to speak. Yeah. But can I just mention as well, to Gabi, that for anyone like watching this evening, that you're going to be a segment on Neuroscience on the 6th of April with me in London, having you as well. And also, if you want to mention anything that you've got coming up, anyone get in touch, or where your contact details are, or social media details.
Okay, I just quickly. I just quickly. So on the 6th of April in your workshop, I'll talk quite extensively about neuroplasticity. And can we change? And I know we didn't have as much time to focus on that, but basically what is needed for us to be able to change and what gets in the way. We'll talk about it to much greater detail. I will give it like maybe 1 hour seminar in Jim's like whole day actually workshop there. Then I have one seminar coming on Saturday. It's called Neuroscience of How to Be Your Best Self. It's quite a wide topic, but majority of topics I'll focus on will be decision making, and then there is some great literature in neuroscience. We commonly think that we are rational beings. However, oftentimes we aren't, and oftentimes we make decisions based on our emotions, which sometimes it's good. But if we are, as you say, if our mind is cluttered and we are just actually responding to the moods and stressors rather than true emotions, we can, really make not the best decisions to ourselves. So we would look at what's needed for us to make the best decisions for us. What needs to be in place. Then we'd look at productivity, how to stop procrastinating, finally. I keep asking that in seminars over and over again. What's needed for us to have more vitality in our life? And then again, also stress. Stress keeps coming up. What happens in your brain when you stress, and how to actually get into the right habits to reduce stress on day-to-day level. Not maybe without even like going to some sort of big meditation camp or something. Day-to-day, I start to feel stressed. What to do now? Yeah. How to reduce stress and how to actually prevent stress. So that will be the topic on this Saturday, which is which date is 19th of March, isn't it? 1 to 4 p.m. in central London. I have another one, which is a request from an audience. Actually, in many different workshops, I've been always asked, is man and woman brain the same or different? And also what happens in the brain when we're in relationships, why we function so differently. You can be like really cool and self-confident, and suddenly in the relationship you act very differently. Or when we're in love, why we act differently. So I'll cover that. And also another topic from the audience was what happens in the brain when we actually are making love. So I'll cover these topics. It's going to be on the 23rd of April, I believe. Also in central London, 1 to 4 p.m. So I do seminars on neuroscience on actually monthly, or workshops. They are 3-hour workshops. So I still have, I think, a couple places left on the workshop this Saturday. So probably under the video I can add the link, or you can go to Eventbrite and search Neuroscience of How to Be Your Best Self. And then you will see, if you go to the organizer, you will see another seminar. Another seminar is called Understanding Your Partner's Brain. And if somebody wants to get in touch with me and have a conversation about neuroscience, or how I implement actually neuroscience in coaching, or if somebody wants to experience what it is like to be coached by me, they can just drop me an email to supergabija@gmail.com. supergabija@gmail.com. So I know my name is a bit funny, that's why I spelled it out. It has silent J in it. That's about it from my side, from my upcoming things.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I certainly would recommend anyone out there get across and get to a seminar. It's fantastic, fascinating stuff. And I certainly really enjoyed this evening. It's gone so fast, really.
Yeah,
time has flown by.
We just started so many different topics to touch. Yeah, maybe we should.
And that's the thing, really. It would take almost like 10. Still wouldn't cover everything we want to cover, but I think the key thing is, giving people the opportunity to get an insight, and I think, like all these things, the important thing is it sort of sparks people in that right direction, and then they can do their own research and learn. But I'm sure at the end of this seminar, of techniques that they can use, and obviously everything that you use is based on case. I certainly wouldn't recommend anyone, use anything unless they are clear on what they're doing. But certainly enough with people, and at least to give an insight into how the mind works and started things off. So I'm sure it's really valuable. But I would certainly recommend anyone watching this evening to get to one of your seminars, and certainly come down to the 6th of April. Fantastic stuff, really. So I just want to thank everybody. Thank you, Gabija, for coming on board. I'm sure we'll have you back on board again as a guest. You've been fantastic. I want to thank everybody for watching this evening, and until next time, keep well and be happy and live life to the full. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Bye-bye, everyone.